we are.
Do you ever wonder if I'm going to show up?
Nope. I'm having my own party over here, so
Nice.
whoever wants to show up. Except for Coffee Shop Girl. We're not doing that anymore.
Oh, okay. Can you still go to that coffee shop?
I would say that I can, but I haven't.
Do you think she is?
Yes.
No. Okay.
Yes. Well, for the record, not that she would even know who she is. Hopefully she knows who she is better than I.
We hope that for everyone.
Coffee Shop Girl is an exceptionally nice and wonderful woman, actually, not a girl at all. And yeah, it just wasn't a good fit. So I had to let her know that, and that can be a little bit awkward. But moving on, right?
Well, relationships are tricky, and
I hadn't noticed.
Are we being recorded?
So far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So the thing I was going to say about it being tricky is that there was the time that you couldn't make it for our time.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be in at JoJo's, and I go, he just said he couldn't come, and I'm not really sure why, but there wasn't really anything more to that. Oh, and I just haven't heard from him. And she goes, "Isn't that great that you guys already established in episode 2 that you don't need anything besides just saying I'm coming or I'm not? No additional text is needed between true friends." And I went, "That's right." And that was just so awesome that she said that.
It's amazing she remembered that. I didn't remember that, but it is how I try to live. So it makes sense that we would have had that conversation. That I just, now that you bring it up, I have this faint recollection of it. That there is, I think you were talking about how you've had a tendency maybe in the past to put pressures on people that perhaps now you wouldn't be so inclined to do, right? When they say they can't go, you're just like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that, right?
Yes. Or if I'm going to put pressure on them, I warn them ahead of time. Like I was in this meeting on Saturday looking for a volunteer to help at a bridge dedication in August, and it was just crickets in the room. Yeah. Nobody said anything. Nobody wanted to. I said, "Okay, just be forewarned, I'll be contacting you all individually and trying to pressure you into this. So just so you know it's coming."
Yeah. Well, did you find someone?
Oh, no. Isn't it amazing how time fills? It's like this day's gone and then that day's gone and then, oh my gosh, it's been a month. So I just haven't, I mean, I've certainly had time, but I've been busy watching television.
Well, that's good. That's good. What are we watching on television?
Oh, I've been watching Castle.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's just a cop show, but I really like the main characters. It's something I watched years ago, and so I've just been watching that at night. Have you ever just not felt like reading?
Pretty much every time I start reading.
But you read so much. You know,
I know.
There's not.
I'm a glutton for punishment. You know, that's a great segue. Okay, so obviously where the intent was to talk about this book, right? I did finish that book. Prior to that book, that one, we should probably say the title, right? Other Minds. You can read it from there, can't you?
Yeah.
So, supposedly, or what I took from the title, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness, I had made the assumption that there would be a lot about octopus and a lot about the source of consciousness.
I think that's a fair assumption.
I was a little disappointed in
As
that
was I.
regard.
Yes.
Because I didn't feel like either of those things were addressed to the extent that they are on the cover.
Yes. Yeah,
So
it was completely clickbait.
yeah,
Cover was
good.
completely clickbait, I think.
Totally. Well, prior to that, I read this one, which Galileo's Error, Foundations of a New Science of Consciousness. I found this one far more interesting. But by the time you get to the end, I mean, I won't ruin it. But then I realized like, oh, okay, I need to review this one because I read this one years ago. Anil Seth's. What's the subtitle there? I can't read it right now.
A New Science of Consciousness.
Yes, Anil Seth is one of the front runners right now for like modern neuroscience. His name shows up everywhere. He's referenced in probably both of these books, Galileo's Error and Other Minds. So I started looking at that again. And then somewhere along the way, I realized like I never did finish reading Eric Newman's The Origins and History of Consciousness. So I got back into that. Then I put that one down. And then somewhere along the way, I got interested in, I bumped into this theory I'd never heard of before. Julian Jaynes, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Have you ever heard of this?
No, but the title makes sense.
Well, I had never heard the word bicameral before. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, well, and I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, that must be a hemispherical.
Here's why I know that word is because that's the kind of Congress we have. And so that's a
Is
fifth
it
grade
really?
social study.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
describing the representatives in the Senate.
Yeah, I think when you look it up
But
in
I
the
always say
dictionary.
bicameral. But
Okay.
you're right. You're right, it's cameral.
Well, it literally means by chamber, like two
Yes.
chambers, like Congress, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I don't remember exactly. I mean, obviously, well, the point I was trying to make here, and there's still more. I have so many books that dive into consciousness, and I've been like, and I picked this one up too. Now I've ran into this guy. I don't know where I found his name. I haven't looked at this at all yet. The user illusion. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
The user illusion, cutting consciousness down to size. I haven't even started this one yet. But so every time I start reading, I'm just it's this painful reminder of how much more I have to read. So yes, I do read a lot, but I don't enjoy. I can honestly say most of the time I don't enjoy it. If I'm cognitive of what I am doing, I'm miserable. Like I have to find my way through that first part and just get sucked in, and hopefully the book is good enough to pull me along. And that, I must say, so of all those books there, Galileo's Error was very readable and compelling. Like, and it went to the quickly. It got to the quickly on a number of things and laid out a bunch of interesting ideas around consciousness. Whereas I feel like, our focal point today, Other Minds, I felt like it took a long time to get anywhere near what I thought I was coming to the party to see,
Well, and that there's something about being written well and poorly written. And I just read like the first 10 pages of Galileo's Error, and I had to put it down because I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's easy to read. They're not using big words just to use big words.
right.
He's like conveying information.
Yeah.
And it was enjoyable to read, and I had to put it down. I thought I'll never finish Other Minds. And I just
Oh,
want to say, um, uh, well, the end of that sentence was, I'll never finish Other Minds if I start reading this other book, because I'll pay attention to that and I won't pay
Right.
attention to. But
Well,
I am such.
that's exciting to me to find out that it had the same kind. Like I think I read all of Galileo's Error in a few days because it just pulled me along. I was just like, oh, yeah. So I'm glad it had a similar effect to you or with
Well, the
you.
first 10 pages did.
Yeah, and I
But
think
I just want to say that I am somebody that seeks out joy, and I'm not really into punishment or torture or agony at this point in
yeah,
my life.
yeah.
And well, I don't think I ever was. And so this is how completely over Other Minds I am, I guess, because just before we started the podcast today, I thought, oh, I better get my copy because I've written notes in there on the
Mhm.
pages. And I just looked around. And yeah, I don't even know where that book is. Uh,
Oh no, is it lost now? Did you
well,
lose all your notes?
no, lost is such strong language. Um, I have had the joyful experience of been, traveling down to Burlingame, traveling down to Fort Bragg. We're getting ready to go to Connecticut, and so things are always in flux here. And I was toting that book around a lot to try and get it read, but I'm not quite sure where it is right now. It's
Okay,
not
all right.
lost. It's just on vacation somewhere in plain sight, I'm sure. But
Yeah, yeah. As those
it's
things
hard
go.
not to just scan around and look and see where did I put that. But anyway, no, but I still
Yeah.
have lots of notes on it.
Okay.
But
All right. Great.
if
Well,
I'm not interested in reading, like I could have read for 3 hours last night, and instead I just chose to watch television for no reason, you know,
yeah.
um, just for downtime, because
Hmm.
I need downtime, and so in the quiet time, I mean, if I'm not interacting with anybody else, and I live with my husband, right? So I'm interacting with him every day. I live with my son, so I'm interacting with him every day. And plus, I have all my own activities. And we started this exercise regime. Usually in the mornings, I would do something similar to you, where I'd read a little, write a little, then I'd open myself up to the world, maybe look at my email or my
Hmm.
Facebook or something else. But exercising every day, it's like then I'm just kind of done.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
exercised for 2.5 hours, and then, well, okay, now I'm just like gonna be a slug.
Y-
I don't
Yeah.
know why, because it
Yeah.
doesn't exhaust me mentally, but my body's just like, I'm done.
Well, I think that's something of human nature. I don't, that doesn't sound, yeah. I think it's unusual to find someone who would would be able to honestly say something that all that different. I mean, certainly there are freaks out there who just they just go and go and go and work and work and work. And at one point, I would say that I was freakish like that about what I did. I was really passionate about my work and would never stop. But it also didn't turn out to be in my best interest to be that way. It caught up
Well,
with me for sure.
I would say that I was that way about school. I just
Yeah,
loved that much, and yeah,
yeah.
go and go and go. Used to
Well,
irritate actually, because people would come up and say to him, "Oh, Virginia, she has so much energy, and she's just always so bubbly." And he's like, "Yeah, she's a slug at home," because you know, you only
yeah.
got so much.
Well,
But
this is
I have a little before we really jump in. I have a little bit to say about confirmation bias.
okay. Well, hold
So,
on though, because it was a good
okay,
segue here, real quick, with what you're talking about.
yes.
This, as far as readability, like this book, Julian Jaynes, "The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind." Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but it's like it's a little intimidating. It's a thick book, and it showed up, and I was like, "Oh shit, what did I get myself into?" I have already read the first 100 pages in a day. It's extremely readable. It's exactly what you were like the way you spoke about Galileo's error. Um, so I'm really excited about it. It's a little bit dated now. It's what maybe, I think it's from the 80s. So there's some dated information in it, but still the theory, I'm surprised I haven't run into it before. And anyway, the reason I bring it up with everything you were just talking about there with your behavior, one of the things that makes this subject so slippery is the ambiguity of consciousness itself. Like when we talk about consciousness, it's rarely the definition is always slipping around, right? Like even talking to one person, what you mean when you say conscious or consciousness changes depending on your intention in that moment. Even in just in the in one conversation, it moves around a lot more than we realize, and that's one of the things that Julian Jaynes is really good about. Like right from the beginning, that's what he goes after. Like what is this thing that we're talking about? Because if we can't define what we're talking about, then like a source of what, you have to start with the what. And I think like Other Minds is terrible in that regard. It's like
yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
It's like, because his definition of consciousness is all over the map, but he doesn't even realize it as he's writing it. Like,
oh yeah, and then he tries to use that other word. He tries to say because consciousness can't be defined. Oh, see, I think it's something I put in the book. He calls it InterSubjectivity or something. It's like,
right,
why make up a new word and then completely be all over the map with that word?
Right, yeah, exactly.
So, are you going to define consciousness for us now?
Well, I
for this
think
conversation.
We'll save it, but there's numerous definitions that we can establish for it. That and depending on where the conversation is going, it'll be really great to track that and go, oh wait, we just moved over here. This definition is more applicable for this version of consciousness. But anyway, before I wanted to let you get in, say what you had to say about confirmation bias. But the reason I brought this up first is that you just got done talking about your behaviors. That at the end of the day, you need that downtime. That was what you said specifically. And that actually speaks to a big part of what Julian Jaynes gets into in the first part of his book in defining consciousness. He said that so much of what we assume requires consciousness does not at all. And he goes so far as to even make a great case that thinking has nothing to do with consciousness. And I think that what you were laying out there with your behaviors actually illustrates exactly what he was talking about. That we actually, that the true thinking that takes place is something that happens when we're not conscious, when we check out. That largely we use consciousness as a way to structure things. I forget the word. He came up with a word in here. But it's something like structure. So it's kind of like you set parameters, like your conscious mind is used to set parameters, and then you check out. And the thinking is done somewhere else. It's not a conscious process at all. So if you think about like your experience or any of our experiences, I'm making a big claim here, but I think we can make this claim that like if when you're trying to find the solution to a problem, like a very difficult problem.
Oh yeah.
Generally, the best way to do it is like you set up the parameters, kind of like Julian Jaynes is laying out, and then you go away. Forget about it. You'll wake up in the middle of the night or in the middle of your TV show. You'll be like, I got it. You didn't get it. It happened outside of consciousness. It's some other process going on that is not part of consciousness at all. And I thought that was a really interesting observation. There's a number of observations like that in Julian Jaynes' books that I've just found really compelling. It's all these basic assumptions we make about consciousness turn out to be questionable at best.
Well, I think that's pretty, what do they call it when knowledge is passed down orally from generation to generation? I mean, I just think that just generally people know that you think about something and then you go and you move to, in that general knowledge, that then after you've worried about it and fretted about it and thought about it as much as you can, then you just move on to the next thing. Because if you
Right.
stay in that space of worrying and fretting and about it, the solution doesn't seem to come, doesn't appear to come. And
Yeah.
that your attention needs to move to some other place where you're not thinking about that at all for
It is.
the
It's
solution to
even.
come.
Excuse me. I think it's more. It's even more extreme than that. You can make a great case that to the degree that you don't move on, you hinder your ability to arrive at the answer. And
Yeah,
so,
I agree. I would say
right.
my personal experience bears that out completely.
And so, with that in mind, you would say that consciousness stands in the way of a lot of your problem solving. Consciousness itself.
Well, we haven't defined what that is yet. And so
Well,
you're saying,
in this particular context.
no,
So
you haven't defined it yet.
okay, well, in this context, I would say consciousness is that directed awareness.
So you're saying that thinking or consciousness is directed awareness.
I wouldn't conflate thinking and consciousness. I think they're different things.
Well, so okay. So help me with an example because I'm not getting it. I'm not
Well,
getting how they're.
so let's say, um, okay, so the you're directed. Oh shoot, it's so difficult. All right, so what was there a particular? So when you were, sorry, I've got something in my throat.
Okay,
It's
well
really
let me you swallow and I'll try and come up with something. So, okay, if I understand what you're saying and I'm just checking back,
Mhm.
you're somehow making okay, so I'm just going to think about I don't know, something. Help me here. Give me something to think about.
Let's go with archery.
Okay, we're going to think about archery. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to be more
Woo!
specific? You want
No.
to think about hitting a target with an
Okay, I'm
arrow.
going to think about hitting a target. Oh, and so you're saying when you relax into it and you don't get all up in your frontal cortex, that it's easier to hit the target. And isn't that the truth? That's true with any sport, is that at
Right.
some point you're thinking
So
about it. You have to think about it to get like maybe some of those initial movements, but it's not until you relax into it that you excel. Yeah,
so Julie and Jane's idea essentially that I'm
yeah,
probably not doing justice for is that essentially the conscious part is about that initial setup, right? It's
okay,
like you kind of it's like you direct your awareness at like, okay, here's the bow, here's an arrow, this is how it works. But then once you've set the parameters, you're that directed awareness, if you're intent on hitting that target with all your conscious awareness, and that's the term conscious gets is so
yeah,
ambiguous, right? But if it is a directed awareness for the target, I'm trying to hit the target, the more intent you are on hitting that target, the less proficient you will be. It's about, and that's what like there's a Zen practice around archery a lot, for that, specifically is trying to hone in on this problem, like trying to it's that directed awareness that has to get out of the way so that it's something other than consciousness that
oh, I think that's splitting hairs, that it's something other than consciousness. Why couldn't it be an aspect of consciousness?
Sure. Well. So we would probably have to start with there's another word that we haven't addressed, right? And that gets tossed around, and that's sentience or sentient, right? So the difference between I don't know. I had to look this up because I really, as I started going, okay, well, so what exactly is the difference between sentient and conscious? and conscious. I don't know if you have a feeling on that already or not.
Well, okay. Well, this is what I'd say. Going into a cult, sentient, I think, is just a synonym, really, for thinking. And so a sentient being is a being that has some metacognition, can think about thinking. And consciousness is an awareness of oneself as well. There's a slight difference there, I guess, but consciousness, it's like if we talk about animals and who's conscious that they are an animal interacting with the world and knows that they're in the world and they're moving through it.
Well, so I
Conscious.
would say that if you use the words with those definitions, like a lot of people would just, I think a lot of people would adopt those meanings, even just implicitly, not having stopped to think about it. This is killing me.
Do you want to pause and get water?
I wouldn't. I've got my coffee. It makes no difference. Anyway,
okay.
When I went and looked it up, what I found is actually a little bit different than what you said. Is that sentience, or to be sentient, is a broader term than to be conscious. So conscious is so sentient. To be sentient would be to be capable of experiencing. So capable of experience, feeling, or whatever. So any sentient being can experience. It's capable of subjective experience. Whereas consciousness is supposed to be is a narrower window within sentience. That is, so to be conscious would be to be able to be aware that you're a sentient being, you could say. Like you can be aware of your awareness. It would be the metacognition, I think, is the word that you've used in the past, right? For that phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay. So then I had them backwards, but when I said it, I said those opposite each other. So, but by your definition, if I understand it correctly, everything that's alive is sentient.
Well, you could make that assumption, but there's tons of gray area, and that's one of the things. Like, so all these books I just like literally every one of them, probably least of which this one addresses these problems, and the answer is a little different every time. It's all pretty ambiguous, and it's not easy. It's not easy. So that, I mean, that is an open question. Is all life, sentient? Is that one of the definitions of life? And so when you reduce, I think the easiest way to try to find answers to those kind of questions is generally to move out to the extremes, right? So if we reduce life to maybe like a single cell organism, if we can agree that there is an amoeba or something, right? Would that be a single cell? I don't even know. That it would seem like, I think it would by definition be considered alive. But I think few people would be willing to assign it sentience, which is the ability to subjectively experience. But things happen to it. It reacts, right? It essentially, you correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm sure you know more about this than I do. But you take the simplest, the simplest life form needs, essentially, what are the most fundamental rules to life? Like, what defines life?
When you talk about, I was just looking to see if I had anything written in here from before. When you mention reaction, so pretty much everything if you put negative stimuli in front of something, even a single cell something, like too much salt or something, it'll move away from that, or dryness. It'll move away from that. Now, not everything's smart. Like, I think about earthworms. I know you said amoeba. I've jumped to
Sure, that's fine
earthworm,
though.
but earthworms, after it rains, they just come out of the ground in droves because they're drowning in the earth, and so they know, I need to get out of the ground or I'm going to drown down here. And
Right.
so they come up to the top, and then they come over and they cross the cement and they cross the roads, and they get run over by cars, and some of them don't realize how big a piece of cement is, and they don't make it all the way to the other side, or they stop in a little tiny patch of dirt that's an inch big, and it's not going to sustain them. So they don't make choices, or good choices, in my opinion, for them to continue. But they responded to the stimuli and said, "Whoa, I'm out. This is
Right.
this is bad here. I'm going somewhere
Well,
else."
we should leave the word good out of it, because that's a big jump.
Well, I'm going to define good and bad as bad leads to death, and good leads to continuation.
Okay.
In this instance.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
So it's, you're either choosing your, in this case with a very simple life, it's either choosing the continuation of its life, or it's not. So the bad choice is a termination point. Right?
Yeah. And
a good choice is
yeah. So, and to me, that's more of a choice and an awareness of, I got to get out of here, than, like, those moths in London. They used to be, I think I even wrote it down. They're called the peppered moths, and they used to be white with just a little bit of black, but when London went through the industrial age, and there was so much soot in the air, that they became darker. They became darker over time, so that then they became very dark. And I don't think the moth was thinking, "Oh, let's get more, whatever makes darker coloration." They were just, the light ones were just easier to see, and more birds ate them.
right.
And so there was that natural selection working on them, and then they became dark moths. And so I don't think that kind of thing is perpetuated by sentient thought on the part of the animal.
Yeah.
But the earthworm, I think that is where they're thinking about it.
So would you call an earthworm a sentient being then?
Yeah, I would. But I'm not as prejudiced as some people that think that there's only humans. I mean, there are people that believe that only humans are sentient.
Oh yeah, well, I feel like I regularly encounter, like, a great example is fishing. Like, some people very very much believe, I've encountered people that believe that the fish, when you pull that fish out of the water on the hook and it's writhing around, and you got to grab it and take the hook out or whatever. They don't think the hook or the fish is actually capable of feeling it. That there is no awareness for pain the way we would have it. And I've encountered that, and to me, that that's kind of mind-boggling. To me, it looks like pain, and maybe it's just in, like, a what would we call it? Anthropocentrism, or a projection of what when you project human
anthropomorphizing.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe that. So I don't know what the fish is thinking, and I don't know if the fish, when a hook's in its mouth, if it feels the same thing, like if a hook was in my mouth, or when I go to the dentist. I'm not sure, but it seems to me that the fish's behavior is trying to get back in the water, and the fish, on some level, is saying, "This is bad.
Yeah.
Continuation is not this way. Continuation is the other way, and I'm flipping around. I'm trying to get myself back into the water.
And fundamentally, isn't that exactly our experience of pain? When you put your hand on the hot stove, that there consciousness is not required.
No.
Like, right. That's a great example of like there's a reaction that has nothing to do with being conscious. It happens. Your body reacts faster than your mind, right? And I don't know if that is that, but that essentially, that reaction is to move away from pain, would essentially be the same thing we're talking about with the earthworm or the fish, right?
Well, okay, so I want to tell the story about my children. Both my children burned their hands on the wood stove. I know, I'm a bad mom. But they both, when they were quite young, burned their hands on the wood stove. And that was never a problem again. They never went too close to the wood stove
That'll do
because
it.
they learned from that. And in
Yeah.
fact, fisher people will tell you that if they are fishing in an area that there's fish and there's been other fishermen there, fisherwomen, whoever, the fish will no longer bite. They like figure it out. They're like, no, I'm not falling for that today. And you
Yeah.
have to wait. And I don't know what the wait period is, but you have to let a place rest before the fish will bite again, because it's the
Right.
same experience. And I don't know if they can learn from others or if that's because somebody got away and said, hey, don't be doing that. You know, and I was thinking,
it could be as simple as natural selection too. In the case of fish, is that you have some fish that are more prone to, they're going to be interested in they see a hook or whatever, and they think of food and they move toward that. Those fish get eaten and they do not, and so that genetic line ends, right? Because the fish is eaten. Whereas the fish that isn't as interested in food that, looks like the whatever the bait is we're using, that line continues because they're not biting the hook. So over time, you end up with more fish that are less interested in the kind of bait that we use.
okay,
No,
all right,
isn't that
but that's
essentially
not what I was
natural
saying.
selection?
Well, yes, that's all
Okay.
very true, but that's not what I was saying. That's not the point I was making, although that
Okay.
is a correct and true point, and I support it 100%.
Okay.
The
Sorry.
point
Go
I
ahead.
was making is that my children, some learning, we'll call it learning, occurred from that reaction that was just reactionary. Some kind of learning happened that they didn't repeat that experience. They were
Mm-hmm.
not anxious to put their hands out on that again. Or, I've heard people say, if a dog's hit by a car and killed, that's not good. But if a dog is hit and just slightly injured, they won't run out in front of cars again. There's a learning that occurs. And I'm saying with the fish, I don't think it goes into like long-term memory for their whole life. But if there's an area where fish are being caught, they stop, even though there's still fish down below that are
Mm-hmm.
not biting because of, I don't know, because I'm not a fish.
Yeah.
But there's some learning about there's something happening. People are trying to get us. I mean, it's not that
Yeah.
specific, but
There's
there's a
some.
learning that's occurring from the negative reaction of members missing from the population from the school.
Right. So interestingly, to tie back to where we started with consciousness, one of the early definitions of consciousness, when philosophers and scientists were trying to arrive at the origin of consciousness, one of the early definitions was to assume that learning, the ability to learn, had something to do with consciousness, and that doesn't seem to be the case at all. So, which seems like you can, according to Julian Jaynes at least, right? And I bought into it. That so when you think about your kids putting their hand on the wood stove again, there's the initial reaction to pull away is not a conscious reaction. It happens faster than you would actually be aware of it in your mind, right? And then furthermore, I would say that the learning that takes place, the not putting your hand on a wood stove again, is not something that you consciously think about. And maybe this is something. Maybe this would be something more definitive to like that broader definition of sentience or sentience, however we want to pronounce that. I don't know. Do you say it's sentient or sentient? I think I like sentient. Anyway, what do you think about that? So if consciousness is consciousness required for learning?
Well, wait. We haven't finished defining them yet. We're still arguing about not arguing, but we're still discussing the definitions of sentient and consciousness. So I can't even
but that's
move
still
forward to the learning part
maybe
of
I
it.
said that wrong, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is define sentient and consciousness right here, by asking the question, where does learning fall? So when we say something is conscious, is the ability to learn part of what defines consciousness, or no?
I don't know. I think about like a lot of the studies that were done on animals in the 60s, like with B.F. Skinner, that
Yeah,
were um, purely reward and punishment based, and they
yeah.
could get pigeons to do a lot of different particular things. And is that learning, or is that reacting to negative stimuli? Um, it's hard to say. When we train our dogs, is that learning, or is that reaction to positive and negative stimuli? So, what is learning? I mean, that's a whole nother thing that has to be defined, I guess. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know.
Well, so there's an example in, I think it was in Galileo's error, actually, they did some experiments to demonstrate that learning, that consciousness actually, like we were saying with archery earlier, can actually impede learning. So it's not necessary to learn at
Oh,
all.
no, I don't think it impedes learning. I think it impedes perhaps proficiency. But you got to
Uh,
kind of.
it can, what I said was not that it does, but that it can, which I sounds semantic, but I think there's a big difference. So you can, so the harder, so say, to use the archery example again, you've gone through the motions a bunch of times. You've used consciousness to set up the basic parameters, but eventually at a certain point, to get really good at it, you have to get out of your own way, right? You have to stop being so deliberate about aiming, and you have to move past that. So at that point, if you hold on too tight and you're too deliberate in trying to use conscious awareness to direct the arrow, you never get past a certain point. That at that point, you're impeding the ability to learn. Does that make sense?
I don't like where you're using learn there.
Okay, so here's the example I was going to use a minute ago from I think it's in Galileo's error. It was an actual. These were some experiments they did to basically demonstrate that learning is not a conscious. Learning and consciousness are separate things. It doesn't mean that they don't get entangled. They do. They're relevant to each other, but that they're definitely not, like, you don't have to have consciousness for learning. And so and they just did this thing with there was like a puff of a puff of air directed at someone's eye. It's like something to do, and a sound, right? So the bell would ring, and a little puff of air would hit the eye, and so the eye blinks, right? And after about 10 repetitions, all you have to do is ring the bell, and the eye blinks.
Yeah,
Now,
those are the B.F. Skinner things. Those
right,
that happened in the 60s. Yeah.
right. So what's interesting though, what one of the things that's interesting about it is that if you tell someone that that's what you're doing, it actually prevents the what you would have learned. So the body will learn to blink on its own to the sound. But if you make somebody aware that that's what you're training, and consciousness, so then consciousness is now part of this process, it impedes the ability to learn it. That you don't get.
It impedes. I don't like that learning. It impedes just the blind reaction. It impedes a reaction, not learning.
But the thing is, you're setting intention. So consciousness is this directed awareness. We're setting our intention to learn for an immediate blink when you hear the bell. If that's what you set your intention, and you put, and this is just according to these experiments, right? Obviously, I didn't do it. I don't know if it was Skinner or not, or somebody like that, right? But if the subject was aware, and that's what we're trying to do, is train your eye to instantly blink when you hear the bell.
Okay.
Then that once you bring consciousness into that, it impedes the ability to learn it. Whereas if they aren't aware that that's what you're training, it happens in about 10 within 10 repetitions. I think that's what it was in that particular example.
Okay, so I understand now what you're trying to say, but I take exception with some of the vocab. You're trying to get a physical reaction, and
physical reaction to an audible
you're really doing
stimuli.
aversion training, right? You're doing aversion training and trying to get it transferred to a sound. Well, let's use a different example.
Okay.
Let's use my husband, who's I think 72.
Okay.
So he's not a professional golfer, but he's a very good golfer. And so I'll define a good golfer in the United States to be in the top 1% of the golfers in the United States. You have to have a single-digit handicap, and he's that. So he's in the top 1% or maybe top 10%. So there'd be no discussion about it, of golfers in the United States. So he knew he was getting older, and he looked around. So he's already a proficient golfer. He's not a pro, but whatever the next level is. And so he looked at people as they got older, and their swings just got wackier and wackier. And the thing is, you can't hit the ball as far because you have muscle deterioration, all kinds of stuff happens. So he has actively changed his swing, gotten instruction, and is thinking about everything. And he's got some physical limitations with balance and so forth. And so he's thinking about all this stuff, and he's put that into action. And so he's still a single-digit golfer as he sees other people around him, not being able to maintain that because they're just relaxed into what they already know. They've got, muscle memory is such a poor choice of words, but I think people understand what that means, They're just in the rut of how they've always done it or how they've always tried to do it, and that just deteriorates over time. But he's been conscious about putting his attention to that. And so he has maintained a level of proficiencies that other people at his age have not.
Well, I think that's a great example, and I follow you. I think that, but I could be wrong about this, but my guess is that, or the way that I would explain that is that consciousness is being used to reset the parameters around a certain situation, but then
Okay, I can agree with that.
okay, but then consciousness ultimately has to get out of the way, because for him to be proficient, or for his body to be proficient at this new way of approaching it, requires that you start off by being conscious, setting these new parameters, like we're going to do it like this, and it feels awkward, but you make yourself it's like you're training your body. And then once you've set those parameters, you have your awareness, have like that directed awareness that is consciousness has to be removed from it. You can't, it, to the degree that he has to think through each one of these motions. It's actually going to be this is what I'm assuming based on my experience with similar kind of things, is that it'll be detrimental to his performance. That is, it, like he's got if he stays in his head about it, he's too deliberate, then he's never going to be that good about it. It's like you set it up, the consciousness sets it up, but then it has to get out of the way. Is that making sense?
Well, it is, but then what we're saying is that what is the amount of time that reset parameters, go, reset parameters, go, reset parameters, go. And so a good, a professional golfer, let's say, since we're using that, reset parameters, oh, the wind, reset parameters, oh, so the duration between resetting the parameters maybe is very close.
I don't know.
In archery, it's not just, okay, I've got it now. All right. And now I just relax and I'm unconscious. And now it hits the target. I don't know. There's some level of zen. I understand the idea about, you got to be like zen with it. But and I probably am using that term incorrectly.
Well, I think that it sounds absurd for that, like you're justified and thinking it sounds absurd, but that's what's so amazing about it, is it actually turns out that, like, so I have a lot of experience with archery, and the worst thing is to be consciously aware of what you're trying to do. And a great analogy for how to become a great, like what you, and I'm talking about traditional archery, right? So it's not all the latest gadgets, but like just, really simple bow and arrow. The really great archers, like the Howard Hills of the world, they were never taking into account wind and distance and stuff in a conscious way. They used a bow and arrow the same way we throw a football. Like you watch a quarterback on the field, and the way, in a football game, he's not doing the math on each one of those throws. It's like he started off some way earlier in the profession. He had to work on the mechanics, but then his body took over, and the worst thing that can happen to a professional athlete, the archer, and I would claim to your husband, is to start thinking about the mechanics of it in that moment when you're supposed to perform. That
right. Okay, I would agree with that. But what are you claiming that is? I mean, I think what I'm having trouble with what you're claiming that is.
Well, it's just I'm not making a claim as to what that is. The observation, and perhaps the claim, it's an open claim. Just I'm not sure exactly where I'm at, but an open claim that consciousness is not actually that consciousness isn't, that learning and consciousness are not they're not tied together. That essentially to learn something does not require consciousness. That's one of the claims in Julie and Jane's books.
So I guess I guess I'm having trouble with the way that you're using the word learn. So you're saying if somebody relaxes into their mechanics, that's learning how to relax into their mechanics, and they didn't need to be conscious to learn how to relax into their mechanics.
But wait, here. The thing, I know
I mean that
it sounds crazy, but it's only because we're overthinking it. So if you spend
I'm still trying to define it.
No. But well, there's a certain craziness to think I totally get it, right? Like I think we generally assume that learning is a conscious process, but I'm convinced otherwise, that it's not actually. Like, consciousness is something separate from learning. And
wait, time out.
yeah,
I can go with that, and I can give you lots of examples of that. Yes. What I'm having trouble is when you're saying I'm relaxing into what I know, and that's me learning. It's like that doesn't make sense.
No, but the thing is, the learning to evolve, like the learning like exponentially improves as the mind as consciousness gets out of the way. That's the claim that I'm making. That I like so. And I feel like musicianship is a great example too. So it's where I was always deficient personally as a musician, is that my mind always gets in the way. I'm always trying to, like, my head's always in it, and I'm always trying to make things better. And the greatest musicians, like, their awareness is somewhere else when they're playing. It gets out of the way, and you see people improve in that state, and their performances digress, or what's the opposite of of improve? They get worse as consciousness comes back into the picture. So you could take like a concert pianist, and you're watching them. They're not consciously aware of everything that they're like, everything that they're doing, and to the degree that you were to ask them, like, if you at the moment you say, "Hey, what exactly are you doing?" Odds are that's actually going to like, that'll actually cause them to mess up. They have to stop and think, like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. Well, yes, I can agree with that, and also I can give you another example of I don't know what this is an example of, but it's the opposite of what you're saying. I think is that I'm not necessarily very conscious or direct when I'm trying to learn something. And so I just like jump in with all my feels. And so I've been in, I think we've talked before, I've taken Cuban African drumming, and I have a Cuban African drum, and I've taken that, and I just, they do that, they're teaching you and you're paying attention, and it's a week-long class on subsequent summers. And so it was about the third summer that I'm doing this, and I'm in there, and I'm just like, I'm not thinking about what my hands are doing. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm in this spot where you say that this fabulous learning occurs, and I'm just there, and there's just joy inside of me, and it was just so great. It is so great. And the musicians come over and go, "You don't even know how wrong you are, right? You don't even know how messed up this is. You're screwing up the whole group. That's wrong. Stop." I'm like, yeah, I can't hear you, but I'm having a great time. I have no idea what you guys are doing. And I wasn't consciously there. I was just in it, just my whole heart. But I wasn't learning or doing the right rhythm or whatever that was supposed to be happening. So I would say that, yes, I think that learning without intention happens. Think about language development would be the best one. Little kids are born being able to learn any language, and then they learn the language that's reinforced around them. I mean, they've shown that everywhere, you know. Like my kid would be proficient in Japanese if he just would have been raised in Japan. So it's everything that's reinforced, whatever sounds. All the babies make the same sounds, and then the parents reinforce the sounds they want, and then the baby learns to just make those sounds, and then language happens.
Right.
So yeah, and
so that process, for example, for the
would
baby,
support what you were saying.
yeah. Well, and I'm just trying to, again, in the interest of trying to find a definition for consciousness, is that a conscious process when the baby is learning to speak?
I don't know. My mom smiles when I make this sound. Ma. I can get my mom to smile. Ma. Da. Or in English, you know.
Right.
So how much of that is conscious? Because the parents reinforce what the sounds that they want. How much is conscious on the baby's part that we don't remember, right? Because the brain's just developing.
Well, I think I would propose that when the baby is looking for the reaction from the mom, that perhaps that is conscious, right? Is that when we desire something, but that
and how universal is it for a baby to hold out their hand and make a sound, you know, when they want something? Seems like that. How universal is that? I mean, and that seems pretty universal, that a baby holds out its hand and then makes some vocalization, and the parent goes, "Oh, they want whatever."
Mm-hmm. But even that could be, what would you call it? Pavlovian? You know what I'm... I mean, because, you know, who knows? I mean, certainly there must be, because you love Jung, there must be a collective unconscious. There's a foundation level. There's a foundation level that we all share.
Who's the we in that statement?
To be a human being, right? Yeah. So
how ethnocentric is that?
No, I actually I do believe that. I think that at some level, to be a human being, like if there wasn't a shared foundation, then we wouldn't all be human beings. We'd be like human beings and whales, right? Like we don't have that. So at a certain level, whatever we're starting off with, you know, that whatever the structure is that our minds
are limited by. Yeah, whatever structure there is that our minds are limited by. Go ahead and finish that sentence.
Well, yeah, it is. It's limited. It's. I was thinking that we come forth from, but I suppose it is a limitation. I think that there has to be a common structure. That's what, when we're all human beings, right?
I'm not. Once people say that human beings have something that none of the other animals have, either consciousness or sentient.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Wait. Or some commonality of energy, cosmic energy that we all share, or some. It's like, as soon as people split human beings off, I'm really not a fan. Right? I don't think that's true.
That's not at all what I meant.
Okay, then I'll do a better job listening.
And when we refer to the collective unconscious, I think it immediately it has this like woo-woo kind of connotation to it that a lot of people take from it, and that's I don't think that was the original intent. It's certainly not how I mean it right now. But it's just to observe that all human beings, and this is not to distinguish us from other animals. It's just to make a statement about what it is to be human, where obviously we all start off with a similar structure, right? We have 4 limbs and a head, and we're bipedal. Like there's these basic things that to be a human being means that you start off with this same basic structure. And the idea with the collective unconscious is literally that there's something that has been passed down generation to generation to generation that is part of that, just that foundation to what it is to be a human being. And certainly it must be there. It's not to make any claims about what the differences are between human beings and other animals, but certainly there are differences. We distinguish between human beings and other animals, so there has to be differences, right?
So you're saying the collective unconscious is some aspect of the physiology of the brain that's passed down in humans?
I don't think I am. Yeah, I shouldn't try to say too much about the collective unconscious.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. All right. You said you like pushback, so here it was. But
yeah, no, it's great. Well, I just know that I'm going to get stuff wrong. I know, but if we wanted to be entirely true to Jung's definition or what he meant by it, then I should probably review it. But what I've taken from it, what makes sense to me, is that there's essentially just a shared foundation that we all that our psyches all grow from. That we don't learn everything anew each time one of us is born, right? Like there are basic patterns that we each start with. So like the inclination to walk, right? Like in a bipedal form. Like that's not something like if you left a person entirely alone. I don't know if this has ever been done. It would be terrible. But if you left them entirely alone to develop on their own, do you think that they would still learn to walk, or are they just modeling their behavior off of the people around them? For instance,
I don't know the answer to that, but it made me think of Mowgli in the Jungle Book, and he's depicted as going around like a gorilla with knuckle walking. But
right?
here, because you mentioned bipedalism and crawling, I don't know that, and you mentioned the bicameral brain. The two parts, and they've got the different items. I don't know the names of them, connecting the two halves. That crawling is so good for brain development. And it's one of the few things, did I already say this to you? It's one of the few things developmentally that is statistically tied to like how well a child can do abstract thinking later, like reading, their ability to crawl. And so most parents are like pushing their kids to walk earlier. Here, stand and walk, stand and walk. I was like pushing mine down, crawl a little more, crawl a little more. And the other thing that's really great for developing that abstract thinking is if they crawl through tunnels, because then there's also a peripheral vision piece that is into play with both right and left. And anyway, that has nothing to do with what you were saying, but I just would encourage everybody not to encourage their kids to walk too early, because there's such great learning on some level in the brain that's occurring. It's developing pathways between the two hemispheres when they're crawling. And if kids don't go through that crawling stage, it really hampers them later on. And I can't give the years of the studies or the names of the studies, but I do know it's been studied extensively.
That's interesting.
But
That's
yeah,
cool.
I think that because the adults are walking around, I think the kids will walk around.
Yeah, well, yeah, the question I was posing is if you didn't have an example, if the child didn't have an example, would they my I would suppose they would still walk. They would still begin to walk at some point, even without the example to follow. It's just like and I was just trying to say that the basic, the basic form of our bodies, like whatever we're starting with, leads us in a certain direction. And it doesn't mean that everybody will end up exactly the same. Obviously, we don't. There's but there are certainly common patterns that just come from, well, from our commonality. Or yeah, would it be the commonality? Is that the right word? Our commonalities.
Well, the design, yeah, what you got to work with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't even remember why what it was. I'm trying to remember why I brought up the collective unconscious. Like it was really just a peripheral note regarding something else. But
I know, and it just stopped me in my tracks.
yeah, I should have known better, because anytime any Jungian stuff comes up here, you're always like, no. But yeah, I suppose we were trying, or we were starting off trying a little closer to what a definition of consciousness is.
And I wanted there to be a definition of consciousness that didn't have the word learning in it, because I think that's a whole nother problem, is what does it mean to learn something? And as I think that was tripping me up anyway, because I probably come with a lot of baggage with that particular word. But so when you were saying that relaxing into proficiency, that you have to get your head out of the way sometimes, I agree with that. Where I didn't agree with you is calling that not being conscious or learning. I didn't like those words attached to that.
Yeah, I think specifically what I said that you didn't like is I said that consciousness can actually impede learning. That seemed to set you off.
Well, it's because you were saying that when you relax into proficiency, that's learning.
No, I think that's what you took from it. It's not what I meant.
Oh,
when
okay.
you because relax into proficiency suggests that something has already been learned and you just have to get awareness out of the way now, or get consciousness out of the way. Or at least that's the way I hear it. And that's not what I think happens at all. I think consciousness, and this isn't even my thoughts. This is Julian Jaynes, really, which I just thought he laid it out really. The claim was really good. Is that essentially consciousness is used to kind of set the parameters for, like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Maybe this is how you should approach it. But then consciousness has to get out of the way for the actual learning to take place, and that proficiency comes over the learning that takes place while consciousness is out of the picture. And I think it's a really compelling argument.
So can you say that without learning, or can you define what it is you mean by learning in that situation? Because that's the thing that's holding me up.
Well, I mean, I guess when we say learn, where it's to learn something is to become more proficient at attaining something that attaining a goal. Is that fair? I don't know. What is learning? I guess that's not always what learning is. I'm thinking of it in terms of like archery and whatnot right now. But we could talk about like knowledge acquisition is learning too, right? And as we connect the dots between different points of information, that's learning, right? Like stuff like you can be soaking up. You can read 100 books, and hopefully at some point it all becomes integrated, and that's all a process of learning, right? Understanding is something that's another big loaded word, right? The word understanding is something about the integration of information, which is another theory for consciousness, integrated information theory.
So before we go off there, so I think that learning, it's the gerund form of the word. It's got that ing on it, and it says that I am actively doing something. I am actively learning, and I don't. I guess I'm not. I haven't absorbed that premise yet. That when I just, I agree. I have learned through my life that if there are times when you need to get your not overthink it and get your consciousness out of the way, or your, whatever. Don't obsess about something. You got to move that to the side, and then whatever comes forth, proficiency comes forth, or peace of mind comes forth, or whatever it is comes forth. I just don't think that process fits what I think about learning. It seems more, learning seems like you're reaching for something and trying to attain something, whereas that proficiency that comes, or that peace that comes, that's a relaxing into, not a learn.
I'm not so sure that they're different things. I think the reaching into and attaining it is the ultimate attainment is in the letting go. It's really paradoxical, and like it's something that plagues my entire existence. Like I struggle with this so much, being and so it's really resonating with me, which is part of the reason I've gotten a little fanatic about all this consciousness stuff, right? Reading as much as I have, is that I am all too aware of how much I am my own worst enemy. That I get in my own way, and it is something of that like an observation of the difference between like what consciousness is actually good for and what it isn't. And maybe it's not good for as much as we would assume.
That's like, this is such a big topic, and my notes are on things like planarian flatworms and their aversion to light, and why that's important.
You didn't really think I was going to have notes on planarian flatworms, did you?
Well, I mean, I took it. I mean, I've got page numbers associated with this because of how the person that wrote Other Minds, because he wasn't a scientist, he was a
Philosopher.
philosopher, and
Peter Godfrey Smith.
I just didn't appreciate the philosopher writing the first 90 pages are supposedly a scientific look at the evolution of animals. I had my invertebrate books out, and I had all these other books out, and I was going, no, that's wrong. You can't make that claim. Look, here's, and I here's an example of what, and I don't even know that much about it. And I'm thinking, I know an example that disproves what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know that example, there must be more out there.
Well, I even felt that way, and you know way more about that stuff than I do, but I just had a sense as I was reading, I was like, there's so much conjecture here.
Yeah, there you go. That was a really great word for it. Yes.
And I don't really have the the facts to back that up, but it seemed really really apparent to me that was what was going on right from the beginning in the book, and that always makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, because if I can't, even if their arguments or their ideas stem and make sense later on based on this premise, if I don't believe the premise, It's like I'm not really interested in all your ideas that are based on this,
Right.
because I am not with you on this,
Yeah.
on the beginning part.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, in that, I know you lost your, or you don't know where your book is right now, so you wouldn't be able to glance through your notes, would you? Or do you have? You said you had notes that.
Oh, I have notes on planarians and their aversion to light and stuff. I just, I think I've already said what I had to say about that. Let me just say one more thing about poinsettias, or as some people say, poinsettias. And this has to do with the this could be projection on my part. I'm open to that. This could be the unconscious mind, or the tapping into the life source that ties all things together. I don't know. But I just recently killed a 2-year-old poinsettia and 2 young poinsettias that, or poinsettias for some people. Anyway, I just recently killed them, and I felt such a sense of loss and disappointment from them that if you were going to say that there was a unconscious mind, I would say that they were tapped into it, and they were disappointed in me, and they tried. They gave it a valiant effort, but I killed them. We were just gone too much, and they didn't get watered, and they died. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I don't want to ruin Galileo's error for you, but I don't think this would ruin it. That's one of the things that he talks about a little bit in there, is that the latest. I think there's a lab in Australia right now that is, well, at least at the publication of this book, so probably a couple years old now, but that they're getting similar results to like, I guess it would be Skinner, and with, like, they're able to train plants with sounds, which is really, really interesting, right?
Yeah,
That,
I believe it. Yeah. Well, they react to light and stuff. Um, I'm going to throw in this confirmation bias. We're a little off topic, but we're maybe in a little safer water. I said that I went to Fort Bragg, and this was a confirmation bias is that when you see, when you're thinking about something, we've been thinking about octopuses and consciousness, and then you notice more of that. And so I noticed this mural, and so, well, I don't know which way it was on the wall, but anyway, so I took a picture of that mural because that was cool when we were down there. And then they had octopus for sale in the store down there, and I had a picture of it that my friend took when she went to the store, and it was dead and upside down, and the everything. And I had such an aversion to it. She airdropped it to me, and I was just like, oh, because she was talking about the octopus at the store and da da da, and I thought maybe it was in a live tank, and I thought, oh,
yeah,
I'll have to go look at it, but it was
right.
just dead. Anyway, I deleted that off my phone, like right away, because I don't want to know about that. And I thought that is such a statement about my life and how I react to things. That is something that I don't want to be happening, that's out in the world, and so I just ignore it and pretend like it's not, and focus on the artwork that somebody did. Instead. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I understand the aversion to it. I think with the octopus in particular, my son has been interested when we go through the seafood section over at the store. He always wants to go look at the fish and whatnot, and he always wants to get some octopus, and just being aware of their level of intelligence makes me uncomfortable. Even looking at looking at it displayed that way, it's almost like having a human head in the on ice in there. It feels something akin to that, right? So
well, and my friend I have a friend that I was asking about his experiences uh, with octopuses, and he said you should watch my octopus teacher um, again. And I'd forgotten about it, and I rewatched that. It's a show, and where this one man becomes very close with one particular octopus. And what struck me was, at least the octopus species that he was dealing with, was their short lifespan. Like, was 9 months or a year was the
Hmm.
lifespan.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
not familiar with the lifespan of other, but that they would learn so much in 1 year is really
Hmm.
amazing to me.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I haven't followed up on, but that was in the other minds that I was interested in, is they said that it, it was talking about intelligence not just being in the brain, that it's in other places in the octopus, that it's throughout the nervous system of the octopus. I thought that was interesting,
Yeah, it actually
especially with
it turns out that 2/3 of the neurons in an octopus are in the arms. So there are more neurons in the arms of the octopus than there are in the what you would call like the brain, like the central brain. And they also, I think it was in that in other minds, it's been demonstrated that that the arms in this case actually do think for themselves, they're uh, yeah, they're operating independent of the central brain, you might say. Do they even call it a brain, the part in the middle of the animal? But that's really interesting that the yeah, 2/3 of the neurons in the octopus are actually in the arms. So
do you know what percentage of neurons in the human are in the extremities?
I have no idea. I
Yeah,
I
it
didn't
made me
even.
wonder about that, because we got them.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good. I'm kind of surprised it didn't even occur to me to ask that question myself.
Yeah. But it really, especially with all the neurons in the legs, it's really amazing that they have regenerative powers like a sea star. So in my octopus teacher, the octopus actually, I think one of the appendages, one of the arms is bitten off by a predator, and then it grows it back all the way. It's like a little
An
stud.
octopus can do that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Huh.
Well, I had forgotten that, and then you just see it on film, and this guy was filming every day, and so you see it be like the little tiny stub, and then you see it get longer and longer and longer, and then finally it just looks like a regular leg, and that it has all those neurons in it that they're regenerating.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, boy, um, there's some information there for humans that are trying to
Yeah. Well,
study
it's
things.
right, and it is. It's really interesting that they're so intelligent and they live such a short period, like you were saying. I
Yeah,
think that if I remember right, the longest living ones we're aware of are between 2 and 4 years. So those giant Pacific octopus, um, but by and large, I think they live less than 2 years, like most octopus. Um,
wow.
so, for him to be that intelligent and that short lived, and another interesting fact around that is that uh, like most intelligent creatures, as we would call them, are seem to be intelligent for their social interactions. Like there's something about the social demands on an animal that lend it to developing a higher intelligence, and that's not the case with octopus either. That they live very solitary lives for the most part.
And there was one exception to that, a species I came across, and now I've forgotten what it was. There was one exception to that where they were living in a colony, kind of. But the
Yeah.
most, the other thing about like humans, and we were talking about learning in humans, and how that occurs. Human babies, right? If they're born, if they don't have an adult to take care of them, they're hurting for certain, and they need an adult or an older juvenile to take care of them for them even to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that over time, the amount of time that an infant needs watching has grown, they think, for humans. And then the octopus, they're so smart, but they can't, at least in my octopus teacher, the adults weren't around to teach the kids. The adults are
Right.
dead by the
Yeah.
time the kids take off. So how did, everybody's got to learn on their own. Everybody's got to experience everything and learn it just for themselves. Or is there like what you're saying, you didn't call it a subconscious. What'd you call it?
Well, the collective unconscious. I
The
was
the
literally thinking that.
collective unconscious of the octopuses are
Sure.
is there
I
that the
think you would have
babies can
to.
get
I
into?
think you would have to make the same claim. I think that whatever it is, whatever that substrate that every octopus, starts from, there's something about the particular psyche, if we can use that word, the psyche of the octopus has to have some commonality from octopus to octopus, regardless of any social contact, right, or contact with other octopus.
I hate it when you end a sentence with right, because it's like I have to go yes or no or just sit
Yeah,
over here and
I'll
wait
work on
for it
that.
to
It's a good
dissipate.
observation. Yeah,
I don't know if I want to agree with that, but that's certainly an interesting idea.
sure. I
And
think I can't see how there couldn't be a common substrate's a good word, right? Common substrate.
well, yeah, they have like I don't know what the number is, but lots of little babies that they're like seahorses. There's all these little babies just like
Yeah,
going out into the water and so many of them are just going to be fodder for larger entities.
right.
But some of them like know to get in a dark hole.
Hmm.
I don't know. And you know,
Well, ultimately the ones that survive are best suited to survive, right? Isn't that essentially the
that's a
process of
tautology. That's
huh?
that's a tautology. The where the definition uh, defines the outcome, and the
Hmm.
outcome defines the definition.
Yeah.
The best suited to survive survived because they've survived. Therefore, they were the best suited to survive. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, well, then that's the natural fallacy right there, right? Is
Yeah,
that I think they call that naturalistic fallacy, that assumption that whatever has happened is what should happen or
yeah.
should have happened, right? And that I do like that observation too. But all I meant
I
to say
think
is
there's
that,
luck in every life. There's some luck, and some
well,
get more than others.
but I think luck only takes you so far, would be the claim
Yeah,
around natural selection, right? So if you have 1,000 seahorses that go out into baby seahorses that go out in the world, and 10 of them go into dark holes, and the rest of them don't, maybe you have the 10 that go into the dark holes survive, and then maybe two or three of the others do, right? The rest of them get eaten. So then you have this overwhelming likelihood that the propagation of the seahorses that went into the hole, like they're more likely to then propagate other seahorses that would do the same, right? Uh, or at least that's the claim, right? And so then over time, it's that isn't that the idea of natural selection, that it just filters out. So you have those lucky three that didn't go in the hole, but then they propagate, and their children go out and swim in the ocean, don't go in the holes, and they all get eaten except for the vast majority of, or maybe a small contingent of those, 10% of those went into holes too. And those are the majority that survive. And over again, that's the whole idea, right? Of natural
Well,
selection.
I do want to say that I know that that some species of octopuses go into holes and dens. I actually have no idea what the little seahorses do.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I just
So
ran with
I
that
just want to go there.
example.
That I'm
Yeah,
not sure what the seahorses are doing. Maybe they
yeah,
should go into holes.
yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Well,
Yeah.
but I think that regardless of what they do, the it comes down to, what I said, and I said it to be facetious, that the ones that survive were best suited to survive. That's not always true, but over time, it does play out. It tend to play out that way, right? Luck can get you so far. You can have extenuating circumstances for any particular life, but in the long run, those that
Oh, for the whole species.
yeah, in the long run, yeah, those that that behave in ways. What? Yes.
To
What was
not
the
get
word? What did you call that? A tautology?
tautology is when
Tautology.
a definition defines the outcome and the outcome defines the definition.
Mm-hmm.
It's a circular argument.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking about different species that go to places where there's no predator, and so there's no natural selection for predators. And then all of a sudden a predator shows up, and then it's fair game. I don't know. I think that happened to the dodo birds. Humans
Mm-hmm.
showed up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Why don't we see? What's happening? Well,
I got a fortune cookie the other day that I thought you'd like.
okay.
Yesterday, out with friends for lunch, open up my fortune cookie. It said, "Take a risk while you still have a choice."
Ah,
That's what it said.
that
And I
is a
thought,
good one.
that's interesting. Yeah.
I like that a lot. All right. Well, maybe that's a good place to end for today. Take a risk while you still have a choice.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
And right back at you. Thank you. As always, thank you for all your time.
Of course. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.